This is Daniela Cambone with Stansberry Investor on the road here in Las Vegas for the Stansberry Research Conference. And joining me now is a face familiar to our show, but now in person. So please welcome back Marko Papic. He is the partner and chief strategist over at Clocktower Group. Marko, good to meet you in person.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure.
A great energetic talk you just gave to all the investors and audience members. I want to give you if you could give us a little sneak peek of what you said. But first, I want to bring it back to our interview a few months ago where you said, if the Fed gets the taper timeline wrong, it could be disastrous for investors and for the economy. Now that we're inching closer, we have a little bit of a better idea of when we may start to taper. What are your thoughts today?
I mean, I think it's still touch and go. They have basically set a pretty aggressive timeline on taper, which also means a pretty aggressive timeline on rate hikes. And I'm not sure that the economy, global economy in particular, is really ready for Fed rate hikes. And so what's really important is that right now, if you look at the FOMC dots, you can see that there's only one basically scheduled for Q4. The market is starting to price in more, two more basically. So investors are betting that the Fed is going to actually adjust its timeline. So taper ends mid-year, and then they're going to start hiking rates much faster than that just one rate hike. If that ends up being the case, I do think that the stock market could correct 10 to 20%, in particular in the rest of the world, because I'm just not sure that global growth is really ready for that pace of rate hikes. And that could be very similar to the last cycle.
Okay, so let me ask you, if you don't think they're ready, what would be your response, or how else would the Fed fight the inflation beast that they're confronting right now?
So my view right now, it's pretty controversial, is that the Fed is cornered because of this. So they've been telling us that inflation is transitory for the past 18 months. One, it's not. And two, the only kind of inflation the Fed can fight is the transitory one. That's the only one that the Fed can actually influence because it's demand-driven. Things that are supply-driven, and one of the things I talked to your audience today was the green technology revolution. There's also the trade war between US and China. There's the pandemic, and there's a lack of capex over the last decade. That is causing very sticky supply-side inflation. So if the Fed raises interest rates 3 times in 2022, prematurely ends this cycle, is that going to incentivize capex to resolve, supply issues? And I think that they're going to start, talking about that in their narrative.
Okay, but Marko, you said, should we taper? Should we see higher interest rates? We could see a 10 to 20% correction down the road. The market has not reacted unfavorably to news of the taper yet. Is it because it's already been baked in, or why? What's going on in that relationship there?
I think inflation by itself is not negative for stocks. What's negative is inflation with little growth, because then corporates can't pass on higher costs to the consumers. So the Fed is behind the curve on inflation already, even with the relatively aggressive taper, because inflation has been proven to be much more stickier. And as long as they're okay letting the economy run hot, that will allow companies to pass those higher costs to their consumers, and the earnings will be, flat or up.
Yeah.
And so that's why what's really important is whether the Fed is truly orthodox and committed to fighting inflation, or whether it's okay running the economy hot.
I'm curious to get your thoughts. I've asked other experts this as well. How concerned do you think the Fed is with this, Marko? You said that they're cornered, or how does Jerome Powell sleep at night, in your opinion?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I don't think they sleep well at night at all. I think they've been telling us it's transitory. Now they're going to have to flip the narrative and say, the inflation is difficult for us to deal with. Disinflation is really supply-driven. So I think they're very concerned, but they're also concerned about ending the cycle early.
Right. A few more questions for you here. We also spoke about the looming debt ceiling at the time. You said, we weren't talking about it enough. It was kind of like that ugly giant in the room. Now that we're kicking the can down the road, how does that play out in your mind? It just keeps kicking down, or?
I think it's over.
Okay.
I think it's over as an issue because there was a big problem that I was worried about. And what I was worried about is that Nancy Pelosi had a chance to incorporate the debt ceiling into the reconciliation bill. She purposefully didn't do that. And she did that to corner Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans into a crisis. And she won. like in a way, because they said, okay, fine, you can have this extension. Now that she has the extension, it's likely that the debt ceiling will be incorporated into a reconciliation bill, allowing the Democrats to raise it with merely 50 votes. So now that fight, like basically I think Republican senators realize, like, look, we don't want to be blamed for a default here. Let's just give her the 3 months, and then we can blame them in the midterm elections for having raised the debt ceiling and spent trillions of dollars on unnecessary stimulus.
Let's talk your talk now. I'm sure our mining audience will be thrilled to know that a big part of it was focused on the green revolution, how you will need metals and minerals like lithium, copper, etc. And you are one of the few lone wolves out there who is bullish on the metals now. What are you liking in that space?
You know, like everything. Diversify as much as you can. I mean, you know, picking a specific metal, I think, is a mistake. So if I told you, like, oh, I'm super bullish on lithium, who knows? Like, things happen up and down. I think just miners in general and also commodity prices in general are going to have to rise.
Why have they been so beaten down this year then?
Well, I mean, copper has been extraordinary, like high, relative to what used to drive copper. What's been beaten down are precious metals.
Precious metals,
like silver and gold. And I think they've been, by the way, great entry point. Why? Because I don't think inflation is transitory. So precious metals have responded not to the green technology story. They've responded to inflation. But commodities like copper have been extraordinary this year. Now, there was a dip, but it's held up. And that's actually really fascinating because copper used to trade one-to-one with Chinese total social financing, TSF. Now, China, of course, as everybody knows, is like having a terrible time. Growth is down, TSF has been low. Copper should have absolutely crashed this year, and it hasn't. And that tells you there's a different narrative driving metals and industrial metals in particular.
We have a huge silver following, so I'd love to get your thoughts because you know there was so much enthusiasm surrounding silver at the start of the year with talk of the Green New Deal and silver's going to go to triple digits. There's not enough silver. When will the momentum enter this space, Marko?
I think it's entering right now. And I think it's entering because of realization inflation is stickier, and also silver is obviously a very important input into a lot of these new technologies. So I think that where a lot of investors, and by the way, I mean, I talked to a lot of hedge fund managers, they were also bullish silver. Silver was kind of a universal idea that united retail investors and really sophisticated macro investors.
True.
And I think where the disappointment has been is that it's really fascinating how much the median investor has believed the Fed's narrative that inflation is transitory. And so silver has, with other precious metals, been behind because of that. And now, finally, we're starting to realize it's not really that transitory.
So good entry point, gold and silver for you
absolutely.
right now?
Yes.
Despite the Bitcoin story?
Well, I mean, I think they can all coexist together.
I guess to that point is that people feel that the enthusiasm we're seeing in Bitcoin has really hampered the precious metals.
I think that's fair. I don't think you can discount that. I think it's time for everyone to accept that story too. But I do think there's industrial uses for silver in particular that Bitcoin can't satisfy.
Okay, triple-digit silver in the future?
Yeah, I think all commodities with any modicum of industrial use are going to be in a bull market.
Wow. Our audience will be thrilled to hear that. Marko Papic, thank you so much for stopping by.
It's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely, thank you.
And thank you for watching. We'll have much more for you, so be sure to stay tuned to StansberryInvestor.com. Thanks for watching.